Okay, so this is my second video that I've ever made. And this is fun. This is actually really fun. So I was talking about the war in Ukraine, kind of trying to analyze, who's winning, who's losing. Um, and I analyze in terms of sovereignty, which is a word that nobody seems to enter into in their debates. They talk about, this plane got shot down, or this village was taken, or whatever. But freedom of action of nation states is what's at stake here. So if you analyze it that way, um, the who's winning, who's losing becomes a much more interesting analysis, because you're like, is NATO able to act as it wishes? Is Russia able to act as it wishes? Is Ukraine able to act as it wishes? So then you very quickly drop Ukraine off of the playing board, the chessboard, because they're not able to act as they want. So they're pawns basically of one player. That they're not a player. They're pawns of a player. Whereas Russia is sovereign. Well, the other thing you need to realize is Russia has nuclear weapons. So Russia could obliterate all civilized life as we know it. They could destroy New York. They could destroy LA, London. They have that ability. And I think China may have that ability, but Russia definitely has that ability. So some of the things that came to mind after doing that is that, what is China's role in this? Why does China care? Well, China also wants to stay sovereign. Okay, that's like a basic idea. They want to be sovereign. They don't want to be told what to do. They don't like being told what to do. They are almost as powerful as Russia in terms of military. So they don't think that they need to be told what to do. Do they want to take Taiwan, not take Taiwan, whatever? More like, do they want to trade with these people? Do they want to send the troops to Africa? They want to. There's a whole range of things that they want to be able to do, not just threaten Taiwan, but they want to do other things. So they want to stay sovereign as well. So they see Russia's fight for its sovereignty as key to their own fight for sovereignty. They are linked to Russia in that way. If Russia is defeated, in other words, if Russia becomes like another Poland, okay, just imagine, then China is the only one that can stand up to the West. There's nobody else out there who's going to stand up to NATO. That's why China wants Russia to win. That's why China is going to support Russia, because they want to be sovereign, and Russia is fighting for sovereignty against NATO. So China's not going to let Russia lose. Okay, that's like a basic idea that, again, no one talks about. Why not? I don't know. Because it's so obvious that this war is not about Ukraine. So that's another thing. China's supporting Russia because they want to keep sovereign. And when did this war start? Did this war start in February? Did the war start in 2014 with Crimea? No. This war started, well, I mean, it's been going on a long time, but this war started basically in Syria. Link it to Syria. What happened in Syria? The West was on a roll, destroying Arab countries, destroying the sovereignty of Arab countries, and Afghanistan, which isn't really Arab, but whatever. And the West wanted to do the same thing that it did to Libya and Iraq in Syria. And guess who said, no, you can't do that? Russia. Russia said, you can't do that. You can't just destroy the sovereignty of Syria. We're not going to let that happen. So Russia moves in troops to Syria, and then Syria is able to fight off the attacks on its sovereignty. And today it's still a sovereign state, sort of. I mean, it needs Russian help to survive, but it exists. It still functions as a state. If the West had gotten its way, Syria would not be a functioning state. It would be chaotic civil war mess of a country, maybe occupied by the West, maybe just controlled through proxies, whatever, but it wouldn't be sovereign at all. So this war started in Syria. That's what I'm saying. Ukraine is not the issue. The issue is NATO versus Russia, first of all, and then secondarily China. That's what's at stake. And that's why this could go very badly very quickly, because if it was just about Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine could come to some kind of deal. Say, okay, you get that, we get this is independent, whatever. No, this is not about Ukraine and Russia. This is about NATO and Russia. NATO and Russia have nuclear weapons. NATO and Russia are very powerful nations. If they extend this fight, if NATO feels like it has to double down on this, it will choose another venue, another country that it can feel that it can get to Russia at, maybe Iran, I don't know, maybe it'll double down in Syria, send more troops, whatever. But NATO is going to keep trying to poke at Russia, keep trying to weaken its sovereignty, because it didn't like the fact that Russia went into Syria and kept the government afloat. It didn't like that. It wants the ability to destroy countries, the sovereignty at will, which is what it's done for the past 70 years. And other countries are just like, okay. No, I mean, the Soviet Union was able to stand up to the West. In Vietnam, for example, the Soviet Union helped North Vietnam, and so the West was unable to keep South Vietnam a sovereign country. And once the Soviet Union fell, there was nobody able to stand up to the West. Now Russia, with the Syrian intervention, is able to say, no, you can't do that. You're not going to be able to destroy that country and replace its government. NATO doesn't like that. It's trying to use Ukraine to weaken Russia. Russia's fighting back, and here we are. That's how to analyze this situation. That ties together everything. Isn't that amazing? So we got China supporting Russia because it wants to stay sovereign. We got Syria being the first time that Russia stood up to the West. Actually, Georgia too, 2008. So it's happening here and there. There was also a color revolution in Kazakhstan where the government was overthrown or about to be overthrown, and then Russia stepped in. Belarus was the same thing. They were trying to overthrow the Belarusian government. Russia stepped in. So you see, this is happening in different places all over the world. It's not a Ukraine thing. It's a NATO versus Russia, with China being like worried, and so they're kind of like, hey, maybe we should get involved and help Russia and keep them alive. So you have the potential for World War III here, because you've got three very powerful nations and groups of nations that keep getting closer and closer to direct conflict. And Ukraine is where it's coming closest. Now you've got trainers, of course, NATO trainers, NATO weaponry, NATO money in Ukraine. You've got volunteers from NATO fighting and killing Russian soldiers. So you're a step away from having actual ground troops from NATO in Ukraine or another country fighting directly against Russian soldiers or Chinese soldiers, as the case may be. Maybe they'll shift from trying to weaken Russia to saying, okay, well, first we got to get China and then we can get Russia. But it's a very dangerous game. And so we all need to be aware of what's going on, and we need to be able to analyze the different issues. So that's why I thought I would say these few comments. I hope anybody views this and enjoys. Thank you.